There's someone Toony on the telephone. Here's your look at the NECA Toys Toony Terrors Screams Ghostface. Bring the fun of Saturday morning cartoons to your horror collection with these adorable little creeps. Pick your favorites or collect them all and make every day Toony Terror time. Figure it's about time for terror? Not quite yet. The first thing we're going to want to do is figure out how tall the Toony Terrors Ghostface stands. Sort of a debatable topic because really you can move his arms. There's some swivels in the shoulders. But really the configuration of the figure, and I'll show you in a second, is really more so set up to be displayed like this. Still that, I'm going to actually take the tape measure right to the very top of his head. Just because he does have the posability in his shoulders. We're going to stop it right there instead. And according to the readouts, Toony Terrors Ghostface stands 5.1 inches in height. Switching that over to centimeters, revealing that the figure is 13 centimeters tall. Not going to bring them all in, but I'll bring in a couple of Toony Terrors for some size comparisons. Here he is next to the Toony Terrors Halloween Michael Myers. We can also bring in Hatchet's Victor Crowley. We can bring in the Trick or Treat Sam. And for a slightly bulkier size, we can also bring the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Leatherface in, which I guess Ghostface is roughly about the same size. His running pose is more closer to the Nun Valak, which I guess technically I should have brought in also for some comparisons. But it kind of gives you a good idea of how these figures do differ from one another, and yet still manage to look like that they're all characters from the same type of cartoon. A big thank you, by the way, to the folks over at NECA Toys that provide the sample of Toony Terrors Ghostface that we could have a look at in this review. Toony Terrors Ghostface is available right now in retail stores and online, should you still wish to pick this one up and add it to your collection. In the department list of accessories, the list would be generally quite small that comes included with the figure, as he doesn't come included with a voice changer, nor does he come included with a cell phone, but he does at least come included with a butcher knife. Let's have a look at that right now. Molded here in plastic and treated to the same color scheme that other Toony Terror weapons have come with, it's sort of this ice blue with a lighter shade of it reflecting off of the blade. This really does lend well to the idea that this would have been pulled from, say, an episode of Scooby-Doo. It always seems the thing that I compare this to be a line from, something you would expect to see in Scooby-Doo. I can really see Ghostface being in an episode of Scooby-Doo. Maybe different shades, the chocolate, the vanilla, the strawberry. Oh wait, that's another Scooby-Doo episode. But the blade itself is all molded here in plastic. The handle done and kept probably in the black, or maybe the blade probably was done in blue and the handle was painted in black. Whatever the color palette they decide to pull from, it does fit into his hand, but it actually fits only into one of his hands. This one hand right here. This one hand is closed shut. It almost looks like he's hitting a detonator with his thumb. This probably could have been an opportunity that they could have sculpted in a voice changer or a cell phone in his hand, but decide instead they just want to give him a closed fist. So really when it comes to placing the knife into his hand, you really only have one option available. It's the location of this hole on the top of his hand. Go ahead and take the knife and just fit it into place. I find it helps to twist it a bit while you're navigating it into the hole. It is really tight quarters, surprisingly. And actually, you know what? If you're thinking of how he's going to be stabbing people, it probably would make more sense that he has the blade facing blade side up. And just, again, twist that back into his hand. You probably noticed as I squeaked and creaked that to get that into his fist, that it is, again, very tight quarters. Tight to get it in, and certainly tight to get back out of his hand. But boy, does that ever look sharp. No pun intended. Still strange, though. I really think that this could have been an opportunity right here, that they could have put a voice changer, or again, a cell phone in his hand. Maybe, again, just too much black, or maybe they just wanted to keep the fist as a regular fist and not have to bring in anything else to the mix. But nonetheless, at least he comes included with a knife. Getting a look at the pose, I used the comparison earlier that he reminded me of the Nun Valak. Valak was also a character that was in a running pose, and at the time of sadly doing this review, I couldn't find where I put the Nun Valak, but if I do end up finding her, I'll do a follow-up, and I'll do the comparison between the two figures. I do like the fact that this one actually is in a running pose. It breaks things up nicely. You don't want all the figures just being in standing museum poses. By making them in a running pose like this from time to time, I don't want it across the board for every single figure, but I think by having it in a running pose every once in a while with certain characters that make sense to be in a running pose. I wouldn't put Michael Myers in a pose like this. This just doesn't make any sense. But a Ghostface does make more logical sense. Getting a closer look at the head sculpt here. Very classic looking Ghostface. It also brings much needed color to the majority of the figure because it's all molded in black plastic. I don't know if necessarily the face is a molded separate piece, but it almost kind of looks like it is separate from the rest of his hood. Or they could have just very well gone in there and painted that white. But that is definitely classic looking Ghostface, and boy does that ever look great. The sculpting on his body is good too, follows the form of what you would expect a human body to be when he's in a running pose, so things like following the guidelines of what a knee bent should look like, and following where the back of the leg would also be arched, looks quite good here on Ghostface. And I also really like the fact he's got the draped skirting of his cloak, sort of draping onto the surface of where you display the figure. A nice also touch is the fact that they've also got the feet bent. Although it makes very little sense, actually, the fact that he does have the one front foot bent like this. I would imagine that if he's running forward like this, you would almost expect the foot just to be straight. I can certainly understand the back of the foot being arched, the shoe that is, because of course that's being bent against the flooring. But the front of the foot, short of maybe just deliberately arching those shoes in the first place, doesn't really make much sense to me why that had to be straight, why that couldn't be straight. Instead, they flattened up the front of it. But again, it adds a little bit of extra color to it. So an otherwise all black character, it is nice to see you got that chalk white face being represented on his face mask, and you got the brown incorporated there into his footwear as well. Let's talk about the posability here on Ghostface, which will be limited. If you are somebody that has been collecting Toony Terrors, you sort of know the territory that they're going to be covering by now. Super stylized cartoon poses of these characters translates to very limited articulation, and that doesn't bother me at all. For the posability on Ghostface, if you go up to his head, for example, his head does just rotate back and forth. It does have a ball joint at least, so it does give you the afforded hinge up, hinge down, and you can also rock it back and forth as well, giving you that creepy looking Ghostface stare. For his arms hinge back and forth. Now the thing about the arms that we talked about at the beginning of this review when we looked at how tall the figure stands, you technically can rotate the arms. But you'll see right away when you start moving those arms how sectional those shoulders start getting. So really, even though he does have posability, his arms really are dictating by the sculpting of the way that the form of the body is. So when it comes to moving the arms, really the best way of having the arms is really following the same form of the sculpt. Again, on this side here, even though you can rotate the arm back and forth, to really follow it and make it look seamless, you really want to have the arm in this permanent looking pose. Again, doesn't bother me at all. Really, like the rest of the body is staction. And just to see how it works behind the scenes, the man behind the cloth, this is all molded plastic underneath that, giving you a nice stable base for displaying the figure. Overall, I mean, Ghostface is such a fun looking figure. And again, you know, talking about the fact that when it comes to these poses of these characters, would I ever put Michael Myers in a running pose? No, I wouldn't. That wouldn't make any sense. Would I put, say, Jason Voorhees in a running pose? Absolutely not. But I think a character like Nun, and even Nun, you could even debate that. The character I think that works the best in a running pose is a character like Ghostface. Because after all, in the movies, that's all he's doing is running and killing people. A fun figure the Toony Terrors Ghostface is. Seeing enough Scooby-Doo episodes growing up, I could swear to you I've seen a character like this chasing around the gang. Maybe not necessarily wielding a butcher knife, that might be a little too extreme for a Hanna-Barbera cartoon. But, you know, seeing a ghost in Scooby-Doo is pretty common practice. Taking it then to the next step of having a ghost running around wearing a black cloak, it's really not that hard to believe. Ghostface looks really good with the cartoon styling. And really, all of these characters, as I continue to say in these reviews, work really well with this cartoon look. Stylized in design and usually in some sort of animated pose. No more the better example than Ghostface here, which you literally have him running around. It works perfectly for this character, and yet still enough of it is resembling the original Ghostface from the movies, so it doesn't look like, I don't really see this as something Ghostface would do. Absolutely, you'd see this as something that Ghostface would do. Running around, chasing around teens. He does that, after all, in the movies. It's not that far removed that he would be doing it in an episode of Scooby-Doo either. What do you guys think of Ghostface? Let me know down below in the comments section. And again, I'd like to thank the folks over at NECA Toys that provided the sample of Toony Terrors Ghostface that we could have a look at in this review. Toony Terrors Ghostface might be one of my favorites of the ones that they've been releasing. If you are also new to this channel, enjoying all the content you're seeing, and also, like me, dig the Toony Terrors line, we could be friends till the end. That's probably not the best line to be using, especially the context of what movie that's from. But we can certainly be friends for a very long time. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, that you turn on the bell notification, and that, yes, Yes, you're coming back to this channel regularly because not only are we going to be looking at some more NECA reviews, but we can also be looking at some more Toony Terror reviews, as there's a bunch that are going to be coming up to this channel. So make sure you keep your Toony cartoon peepers peeled, because there's definitely going to be a lot more content coming your way. And as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.